How we doing, guys? We're finally back. Russo and Zantz, Turn on the Jets live. If you're listening to this, you'll be hearing it on the Badlands feed. We appreciate everybody who's been patient with us. I know it's been a while. Russo, how you doing? A lot's gone on since the last time we did a show.
Back and better than ever, baby. I am excited. I mean, free agency, right? And it's honestly, before we even get in, like it's been what, 3.5 months at least. We really haven't been together since probably before the last game of the season. I don't think we did a show after
Yeah,
that Patriots victory, but it was a long season. I think we don't need to rehash that, but maybe this.
you're on the mute, man. I don't know what just happened, but anyway, I agree with you. It's been far too long. We definitely need to get everything going. I don't know what just happened, but it just says your mic's not connected. But
There we go.
yeah,
I'm back.
great. It shows that we haven't done the show.
Yeah, we got to iron out the kinks. So no, we haven't done it. Yeah, sorry, we haven't done a show in 3.5 months, and obviously, I'm just getting back in the swing of things here. But maybe what I was going to say was that maybe we had to endure this season and hit rock bottom for us to come out on the other side and get this last 6-7 days that we really enjoyed.
Yeah, no, it's been awesome, and I know that you and I have definitely been on the more negative side since the offseason hit. I'm sure anyone who follows us on Twitter or sees what we write in the Discord has certainly seen that I haven't been the biggest fan of the organization. But I will say that, thinking about how free agency opened, thinking about obviously with the changes that were made to the staff in the front office, it definitely, I feel better about things. I still have some concerns. We could talk about that, later on in the show. But we do have to kick it off with one of the funniest, most entertaining days in Jets Twitter history, the TEC saga. I'm a pork roll guy. I got some heat in the Discord for not calling it a Taylor ham. My take is pork roll is the type of meat. Taylor ham is who makes it. So you can argue if you want. As long as you enjoy the sandwich, that's all that matters to me. But shout out to NYJ Matt, former friend of the program, has been on the show before, for getting this done. I know he didn't actually get it done, but kudos to the Jets for seeing a guy. He had 3 visits lined up. The Jets were first, and they made sure that he did not leave the building. You got to give him a lot of credit, man. It's an unbelievable move. I know there's risk involved. I know he's injury prone. I know people can say he's always on the injury report. I get all that, but when you think about how the wide receiver room looked prior to him being signed, it's Aaron Lazard, who pretty much everyone on the team would trade to the New York Red Bulls tomorrow. We have Xavier Gibson and Brownlee, who are young and promising guys, but again, we don't think that they're ready for full-time starting roles. And then obviously Garrett Wilson, who's a superstar. But now we finally have that guy who's the jump ball, Brandon Marshall type, something that we've been craving as Jet fans basically since 2016 after, Marshall left. And we have that guy. So, Russo, how do you feel about Mike Williams? It's amazing. I'm so excited.
Yeah, I am extremely excited too. And I think we all, everyone, all Jets fans and Jets Twitter kind of went into yesterday saying, don't let Mike Williams leave the building. But we all had the expectation, like a good business sense from Mike Williams' side was to take the other meetings, right? To go to the Panthers, to go to the Steelers. So I think we all said it, but really we knew okay, logically, this probably isn't going to happen. So to your point, credit to Joe Douglas and staff for really legitimately not letting him out of the building, because in reality, he is the perfect complement to Garrett Wilson. He is that big target. He is that jump ball guy. He is going to go up and get those 50-50 balls. He's a legitimate deep threat. And he's that classic outside guy that still allows Garrett Wilson to do his things both from the other side and from the slot. So when you think about it, you couple that with Aaron Rodgers returning and the type of receiver that he is, this was the move that needed to be made. Injury concerns aside, everyone says it now. I mean, he had 1 year where he lost it. That was last year. Every other time, I think that the injury history is kind of overblown a little bit, where any fantasy owner knows that he's just dinged up a lot. He shows up on the injury report a lot, but he plays more often than not. And that's honestly going to be the biggest thing is availability for them. But having sign Mike Williams and you kind of look at the rest of the market, and even as it shook out over the last, week of free agency, really, he was the last and really the only good, legitimate number 2 wide receiver option that there was. Even if this didn't happen, they would have probably had to pivot to Odell, who at this point in his career is maybe a number 3 at best. A good number 3, obviously better than what we have, but that's not saying much. So getting this done really felt like it had to happen. And again, kudos to Joe Douglas for really not letting him out of the building and having him for 1 year and 15 mil. I mean, we'll take it. That's a bargain. I think what did Odell go for to the Ravens last year? Was it 16 or 17 mil?
I think it was 18, honestly.
18. Like, you think about that in comparison and what we would rather have. I think any Jets fan in their right mind would sign up for Mike Williams and what he brings to the table opposite G-Dub.
Yeah, as long as he's healthy, he's still 29 years old. I still think he has that, that speed that he's had into his prime. I think he probably has a solid, maybe 2-3 really strong years left, provided he can stay on the field. But man, it's just going to be so awesome to watch Aaron Rodgers throw that ball up to him and him to go up and get it. Like, we just don't. It's been so long. Like, I know Corey Davis was kind of brought in to be a big body target, and he was a solid Jet, and he actually is available right now. Maybe they'll bring him back. I don't know. But, like, just thinking about, like, the highlights I've seen of Mike Williams, and one that comes to mind, I think it was on January 1st, 2023, so the end of the 2022 season. It's against the Rams. It was like a one-handed getting his feet in on the sideline grab. It was basically like a poor man's version of the Odell catch. It was unbelievable. And he had like this unbelievable game earlier in that season against Kansas City. I think he had like 200 yards and he had 2 touchdowns. It's just the thought of finally having 2 guys. And I know we were higher on Lazard when they made the move and it didn't work out, but it's awesome. And I'm so excited. We could move forward because there's a lot of things that we haven't talked about. Yep. Going into Tyron Smith, which was another home run for Joe Douglas. And as I've been saying, I've been negative on Joe Douglas. I've been saying his record is what his record is. It's 27-56 over 6 years. I know that there's a lot of good things he's done, with the 2022 class, signing DJ Reed, now with these moves of Mike Williams and Tyron Smith, obviously getting Aaron Rodgers in the building. But if you're not winning, it doesn't matter. But going back to Tyron Smith, it's just, if the guy's on the field, he's absolute money. He was second-team All-Pro last year for left tackle. It basically means that the media felt he was the second-best left tackle in the NFL. I know there's a huge risk with him, and he hasn't played a full season since 2015, which is almost 10 years from now. But to me, assuming that they add the right depth, this is a move you make a million times in a row, and it doesn't matter. It's so worth it. He's only 33. It's not like it's Dwayne Brown, who was 38 when we signed him. He's a little bit younger. You don't have any questions about the ability. He doesn't have to practice. I don't care. It's amazing. What are your thoughts about Ty Smith?
I think it's really interesting how it happened and the fact that it fell the way that it did. And it almost seems like the Jets didn't expect it to happen, but it still fell their way is kind of awesome. And for them to get him for 6.5 against the cap this year and up to 20 in incentives for the remainder of 24 is just insane. So to solidify the left side of your line, to have that upgrade over Mekhi Becton, you really you can't what's the word I'm looking for? Like you can't overstate how important that is. Like the Jets made moves on the offensive line outside of Tyron Smith, but he is the anchor and he was the move. And I think it was a pipe dream for a lot of us at the start of free agency. But then as free agency rolled on and as those first few days kind of went and there wasn't interest, you started thinking, okay, maybe there's a real chance here. And for them to get him at the price that they did as a starting left tackle on this team, blocking for Aaron Rodgers, like how can you not be ecstatic about that? And yeah, I think, the injuries obviously are a real concern. So depth is going to play a factor in this and how ultimately the move is judged. But he's just dinged up here and there. It's never like these, insane season ending injuries. It's just, nicks that come up. He misses a game or two because of a hamstring or whatever. But those are things that you deal with. But if the Jets can legitimately get him for 14 or 15 games as a starter, you consider that a win all day. And getting him on the left side, which you said it, second best tackle in the game, like that's a legitimate upgrade over Mekhi Becton. And as much as we wanted Mekhi Becton to succeed here, you saw at the tail end of last year, he was the worst starting left tackle in football, and that wasn't good. So they obviously they needed an upgrade, and they got a huge one in Tyron Smith, and no Jet fan can be upset about that move.
It's a no-brainer. It's amazing. I mean, the hope is that they sign someone like a Bakhtiari or maybe another guy who's like a lower-end veteran who has a starting experience. It could be that, backup. And if you can get a combined, 17 games out of those two guys, even if it's, like you said, maybe Smith could be playing 12 to 13 games, it's perfect. I mean, as long as, he's playing, that Aaron Rodgers is going to be in good hands. And you could just see it. I've seen a lot of different clips, of his film throughout his career, mainly from last year, and him just bulldozing everybody. And it's it's amazing, and we really haven't had that left tackle solution since Brooke retired. Unfortunately, it's been a revolving door, and we might actually have an answer.
Sorry, I think no, you're fine. I think you just start to feel good about the offensive line as a whole, and I think there's still a move or two to be made. But the good thing is that going into a season, the Jets they're not banking on a huge roll of the dice. Like you feel, and I know Joe Caporoso has mentioned this a lot, but like you feel a whole hell of a lot better with Wes Schweitzer, Carter Warren, and Max Mitchell being your 6, 7, and 8 options than you do them being like 3, 4, and 5. Right. Yep. And that's good. And if there's another move at a depth piece on the offensive line that can push them to 7, 8, and 9, then you feel that much better. So to your point, if you get a Bakhtiari and he's your swing tackle, you feel pretty good about him and Tyron Smith being able to play a combined 17 games. So that's really, I think that's the key. And that's something that the front office and Joe Douglas have to keep looking for in the later stages of free agency and or the draft, because that's going to be the key here. Because you're right. I mean, we can pivot a little bit to the Morgan Moses trade, which was a good thing, but him and Tyron Smith are both 33 on 1-year deals. So this is a window move, for both of them. And Joe Douglas realizing that his ass is on the hot seat a little bit.
I would hope so.
Nonetheless, yeah, I mean, he should, and I think that's what's propelling him to make these moves. Which, thank God for all of us, right? But you see 2 33-year-old tackles who, Morgan Moses is durable. He's kind of the opposite of Tyron Smith. He's an Iron Man, and news today was that he played all of last year, or from week 4 on with a torn pec, which is just insane. But it's crazy that we let him walk a few years ago. But I'm glad he's back in the building, and I'm glad Joe Douglas made the moves to shore up this offensive line.
Yeah. Listen, great move again, Morgan Moses. He was a guy that was very solid for the Jets. The last time they had him, it was unfortunate that they didn't retain him. And, but you made you corrected the mistake. You got him back in the building, and it's at a reasonable cost. It's kind of crazy to think that him and I guess Simpson are basically the same amount together as what they were paying Laken Tomlinson. So it's like you're getting 2 for the price of 1. I know that dead money obviously stings, and it sucks because Laken's a really good guy, and we're hoping it'd work out. But you got to give the Jets credit. They finally have pivoted off some of the mistakes that they made over the past few years. They understand that there's got to be a little bit more urgency. With that said, I want to know some of your thoughts of basically what else they need to do for the remaining period of free agency. Obviously, it's nothing going to be super splashy. I know Clowney was in the building today. I saw someone in the chat actually wrote that he left the building, and people are going to be concerned. I know there's been some rumors on Twitter that this isn't as like something that they're going to be pushing as quickly on as they did with Mike Williams, and he's probably going to explore his options, because it seems like at this point in his career, Jadeveon Clowney is just trying to take his, number one, go to a scheme that fits him so he can be productive. Number 2, maximize the dollars he can get. He's not the same player, but he's still productive. And I think the one thing that's really great about him is that he's so strong against the run, and that could be something that they need, especially with some of the holes that they've had on the interior, in the offseason, especially with Jeff leaving, which I was really upset about, given the fact that the Jets were given an opportunity to re-sign him, and they weren't quick enough to get back to him, which sucks. But where do you want them to address next?
I don't know. And I think this is a debate that we can kind of have, which I think when you look at the glaring holes remaining on this roster that they really could and should address during free agent or in the remaining period of free agency here, one is re-signing Justin Hardy. That's still a huge thing. I think you've heard Thomas Morstead talk about how important he is, like knowing that you have a guy that you trust on the outside when you're punting. Like that's a big deal. And special teams, and I know we've pointed back to it, but Mike Williams' old team, the Chargers, that game was over before it started. As soon as, Hardy wasn't in there, Irv Smith, blows coverage on a punt. That punt gets returned for a touchdown. That game was over, 5 minutes into it. So Hardy's importance can't be overstated on the special team. So that's number one. I think you're still looking for a wide receiver 3. Do they still look to bring in Odell Beckham Jr., or do they look to maybe like a Hunter Renfrow, some guy that is that stereotypical slot receiver? Do they look to address that in the draft? I think Clowney or an edge, any edge really. I think it's been a good point that's been brought up. Not only are you hoping that Will McDonald makes the leap and Jermaine Johnson continues to build on a very impressive year 2, but you're also looking for that third edge rusher that takes Bryce Huff's snaps and takes that attention off of those other, whoever's on the opposite side, right? That is a very important piece. And the other, position of need is safety. They are going to rely now on Chuck Clark coming off a lost year, and then Tony Adams on the other side. So is there a third safety that they bring into the mix? Do they bring Ashton Davis back? I know that he had some He had desire to start elsewhere. I don't know if that's going to come to fruition at all. He had probably his best year last year overall in spot duty, but I think he saw a lot of playing time on the field, and he was kind of a ball hawk when he was out there, to be honest with you. So those are the four needs. You got Hardy, you got a third wide receiver, you got Clowney or really any edge, and then a third safety. So if I had to rank them, I'd probably say that edge is number one, wide receiver 3 is probably my second positional need, with Hardy behind there, and then a third safety is 4. How would you kind of say, what would you prioritize in that in those 4 positions?
So I really want them to get a veteran running back, and I don't think that's something they're going to do probably until either after a mini camp or in OTAs, just because that's the nature of the position. Typically, some of the guys want to hold out and not do any of those like off-season workouts just because of like the toll it puts on their body. I know on this feed, I think Joe and Connor talked about Zeke. I think it's a perfect fit. Veteran, he was pretty solid for the Pats last year. I know they were abysmal on offense, but he can really be strong in pass protection. And I know that that's something that Brees can do as well. But we haven't really seen any signs that Izzy is strong there, and we really don't know what to expect out of him, even though we all were really high when they made the pick last year. And, you don't have Michael Carter anymore. They traded him away. And I just think that at this point, they may take up a guy in the draft, but it's hard to bank on a rookie, especially considering this is a weak class. But I would say getting a veteran running back, bringing back a safety. I actually really wanted to bring back Ashton. I think Ashton really developed nicely last year. I mean, he shows that he could do things on special teams. He's been productive when he's been out there on the back end. And I know they like to do kind of a rotation at safety. But I know he's looking to be a starter, and that the Jets are definitely not going to guarantee that, with Chuck Clark being re-signed and obviously Tony Adams being locked in as well. But they do need some depth there. I mean, the dream would be a guy like Justin Simmons. I just don't think they're going to be able to pay for him, given where they've spent money with Tyron Smith and also Mike Williams. But I agree with you. Hardy is another priority. I think you just need to have your ace on specials. But I do think that you could find somebody else who could be, probably around the same price, who could be productive. I'm not a special teams guru, so I couldn't say like who they should sign instead of him. But I wouldn't, put Irv Charles just positioned into his spot. I think you should get someone who's a little bit more proven, but I think it's easy to get that done. It's not like he's going to command a lot of money on the open market.
Irv Charles, good correction. I said Irv Smith.
I know you said Irv Smith.
I got mixed up with my Irvs.
It's fair. I've been waiting for the Irv Smith breakout since he was drafted. Yep. I think he just signed. I forgot what team he signed with. He signed with a new team in the offseason. But ultimately, those are the things. I do want to transition to the draft. I think that everything has gotten extremely interesting, and I think Daryl Jarmara, even before the Mike Williams signing, dropped that bombshell of us trading up for Marvin Harrison Jr., which I would be so giddy if they did it. Listen, I'm not plugged in over there. I don't know what they're thinking, but I just think with the moves they made with Tyron Smith and Mike Williams, I feel like they have so much flexibility of what they can do. They can trade up. I think that at this point, you don't necessarily want to borrow, draft capital from future years, especially considering what the state of the team is. You're not thinking about the future, you're thinking about right now. But to me, you could take a pass catcher at 10. You could take a tackle at 10. You could trade back and get one of those guys as well, maybe like a Brian Thomas or a Troy Fontenot. I mean, there's so many things they could do. But if you had to pick the one thing that you want them to do most with that pick, whether it's trade up, stay put, or trade back, what would you want them to do?
I think, when you look at this, and I tweeted this out the other day, like the beauty of all this, and us Jets fans, we just have a hard time just being happy, right? And that's so, and I said this before free agency, like operate, Joe Douglas should operate this free agency period like there isn't even a draft. Like go and fill everything that you can, so then you have this positional flexibility. So now the Jets are in this position where no matter what, like as long as they don't take a QB, right, at number 10 or in the first round, as long as you go offense, like no matter where it is, you're happy. No matter what positional need you address on the offensive side of the ball, you're good. Like whether they take an offensive lineman that's got positional flexibility, whether they take a tackle, whether a left tackle or right tackle, and it's a depth piece, but a long-term one up an aging offensive line now, or whether they go pass catcher, either receiver or tight end, whether they trade back, whether they trade up, like you're happy because they've addressed so many needs on the offensive side of the ball that you feel pretty good about the direction of this team and this offense. So having said that, I think my ideal pick right now, obviously if they traded up for Marvin Harrison Jr., I'd be ecstatic. I don't think that's real, but hey, Daniel Jeremiah and Joe Douglas are close. Who knows? What I would say is I think that the prospect of staying put at 10 and getting a guy like Brock Bowers is probably like my number one thing on the board for me. That would excite me more than anything. The Jets haven't had a legitimate tight end really since Dustin Keller. And even that, in comparison to, all tight ends and really where they are, like he was okay. He was a good Jet. He was a good tight end, but he wasn't like the greatest. So having a guy like Brock Bowers though in this offense to pair with Tyler Conklin and Breece Hall, Garrett Wilson, Mike Williams, like that's what kind of excites me. But either way, I think no matter what, you got to be happy as a Jets fan with the flexibility they've afforded themselves with this pick. And that's the best part about it all is April 25th, I think, is going to be really fun.
Yeah, it is. It's going to be very interesting. So for me, we actually got a comment from Matthias Simon in the chat on YouTube. He was saying if you're bringing another wide receiver like OBJ, not that I want him, it'll free them up to take an offensive tackle. So that's a fair point. I really don't want Odell Beckham at this point. I think Tyler Boyd would make more sense for, number one, the production. Number two, I think the cost is not going to be too crazy. But for me, I would prefer that they trade back. And the reason I say that is I want them to recoup a second-round pick. This is such a deep wide receiver draft. It's not that I don't want someone like Roma Dunze or Brock Bowers if they were to fall to 10. I just think that they still have to think about a developmental tackle like we talked about earlier with Tyron Smith. He could miss some time. You still have to think about the future. Morgan Moses is old. So having someone who's young and who could potentially play down the road in the season is important. And then you could still get that weapon that you're looking for in the second round. There's so many guys. There's Roman Wilson. There's Ricky Purcell, who apparently is, rising up boards, could maybe go in the first round. There's, Xavier Leggett. There's so many different guys, and it just gives them so much more versatility of what they can do. So to me, trading back would make the most sense. Taking offensive lineman or potentially a weapon if you like one, and then obviously whatever you don't take in the first round, you can do in the second. That's to me makes the most sense. But again, if they love a guy like a Dunze or Brock Bowers, I'm not going to be upset if they take him at 10.
Well said. I agree. I think recouping that second round pick would be huge. If they could slide back 4 or 5 spots, and like you said, it's a very wide receiver deep draft, so you get your slot, you get your wide receiver 3 in the second round. Maybe they finally break the curse of the second round pass catchers that's been going on for 15 years. That'd be great. But again, you're going to be happy no matter what. As long as they don't take interior defensive line or edge at 10, I think all of us will be extremely pleased with the pick, no matter what it is.
If they take Dallas Turner or Byron Murphy, I think that people are going to have pitchforks outside one.
I very much agree.
Yeah, and probably throwing breakfast sandwiches at the entire building. So it's been a lot of fun to shoot it. We actually got a good comment from Palikar in the chat. He said, just a thought, trade Reed for a second in a deep DB draft. I've heard that the corners are definitely deep, but at the same time, it's like you're probably gonna have to pencil in Eccles in as the second starter, which I think you can get away with. But at the same time, I think keeping DJ Reed for one more year because it's an all-in year makes the most sense. I love the guy. I know he had a down year compared to his first year with the Jets, but I think the way the defense is going to be playing, assuming you get a decently healthy Aaron Rodgers, I know you can't assume anything anymore with the Jets. The defense is not going to have as much pressure to be perfect. And I feel like that was something that really took a huge toll on the team. So I want to keep DJ Reed. I understand it. And if they made the move because they're thinking about the future, I get it. I wouldn't be upset unless the compensation was terrible. But I do think that keeping him one more year with this window makes sense. And then, if they don't want to pay him for a third, because typically corners fall off at the third contract, I totally get that as well. But I think keeping him around makes more sense.
I think what he brings on the leadership side too is huge,
yes.
and you can't really gloss over that fact. The other thing about the defense, and we've honestly been saying it now for 2 years, is how good they've been, but how, aside from Sauce Gardner having the concussion in the Eagles game, DJ Reed being out with a concussion, I think for the Eagles game and another one, they really have been injury free for 2 seasons. Yeah. So not only
that's not going to happen every year.
It's not. So you have to depth is going to be a huge thing. Depth is always a huge thing, and they have it right now. So from that standpoint, while I agree there is flexibility there, and Reed does have a big number, but I think he's also eligible for a contract restructure that could save some money too. But
yes,
keeping him with Eccles as a depth piece, and Eccles can be a solid starter. We've seen that already. So having him as a depth piece for either Sauce or DJ Reed on either side, I think is something the Jets should obviously keep in mind. So I'd be a little wary of cutting DJ Reed or trading DJ Reed right now to save the cap space or go with a younger guy.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think that they're going to do that. I think, if anything, maybe they restructure or extend some guys. I've heard rumors. I know Will has mentioned this, that they potentially might extend Conklin to free up some more flexibility. I would love that. I think Conklin is perfect in the role that he's in. He's not necessarily like penciled in tight end one. I think he's a borderline solid starter. He's solid as a pass catcher, but I don't think he brings as much as a blocker. That's what they have Ruckert for, and obviously I think they're hoping to develop maybe Coots or even Yeboah, who's more of a special teams guy. But I do want to transition to the front office, because you and I, like we said earlier, have definitely been critical of Joe Douglas. But I want to know, do we think Rex Hogan was really the problem? Because all of a sudden this guy's out of the building, which was one of the weirdest things ever, because it was like 3 weeks later that we found out that he was gone, even though apparently it happened right after the season. But was this the guy that was actually holding all us back from making moves in free agency? Because all of a sudden Joe Douglas is closing on these big name players that we never would have thought were possible. We dreamed for, but is there some truth to that? Because our guy Meigs has definitely been saying this for a while, and I believe him. I think that Rex Hogan was definitely the problem.
I mean, I think obviously there's nothing we could do but speculate. It to me, it seems a little more coincidental than anything else. There's a lot of things in play here. Let's not we talked about already. The Tyron Smith signing was amazing, right? But the Jets were even surprised that it fell into their lap. So let's not throw a parade for JD. Yeah, it's been a really, really good offseason, no question. However, his feet are to the fire, his ass is on the hot seat. He's got to spend. He's in a very, very clear. Really, I mean, this team is in a 2-year window with Aaron Rodgers, but Joe Douglas and Robert Saleh are in a 1-year window to produce here. So it's kind of coincidental in timing and all that. And I also don't want to completely forget about, and I'm taking this question in a bit of a different direction and outside of Rex Hogan, but I have to say this, let's not forget how this free agency started, and that was by losing Bryce Huff. And I think I will go out on the limb and say that was the biggest misstep of this regime. Losing Bryce Huff was the biggest mistake that Joe Douglas has made for a number of reasons, right? This is homegrown talent at a premium position that you developed that was a known quality, and you let him walk for nothing. You could have extended him during last season. You could have gotten the deal done. You could have traded him and gotten something back for him, but you chose to do nothing. So that was the worst mistake of Joe Douglas's career, at One Jets Drive. And there's no question. And I think there's people that argue the Zach Wilson pick was, and I will throw water all over that because I disagree, because when you take into consideration the other options that he had that year, it was either trade back and keep Sam or take one of the other quarterbacks that were in that draft that obviously have proven to be almost as bad as Zach Wilson. This Bryce Huff thing was the worst thing. So let's not, Rex Hogan, that's what started this whole thing for me. However, I just don't want to lose sight of the fact that he did let Bryce Huff walk for nothing, and that was awful. So I said my piece. I had to go there. I had to get that part off my chest.
So it's one of the worst moves that he's made, and it's not necessarily just because he allowed him to walk. I mean that he didn't bring him back. It's he allowed him to walk for nothing when there was options to trade. I'd spoken to people around the team, and they had said that they had offers for a second or a third round pick before, in the middle of this last season. The fact that you were short sighted and thought you were just going to bring him back was stupid, because clearly you drafted his replacement. The writing has been on the wall. You clearly have thought that there's a chance that he leaves. Love Bryce. If the sacrifice that they made with letting him go allowed us to get Mike Williams and to get Tyron Smith, I think it was well worth it, and even Morgan Moses for that matter. So, it's hard because I love the guy. I wanted him back. It's 10 sack seasons or more for a Jets edge rusher did not grow on trees, as we learned in his playoff drought. So, it's a wait and see approach. Hopefully these moves work. But again, I said this earlier today on Twitter. I just think saying that Joe Douglas is a great general manager is a huge stretch. 27-56. He has done things that are definitely positive, but I think the negatives are outweighing the positive. And the reason I say that is look at the results on the field. And you could say, he had Adam Gase for 2 years. You could say it's Robert Saleh's fault. Well, he hired Robert Saleh, and I have my issues with Saleh now too, as someone who definitely defended in the past. But you gotta just put blame and realize that it's all one thing. It's the Jets, so it's not. And it's 6 years. I can't be like, this guy's a great GM. He's lower on the spectrum in that regard.
Yeah, and let's not lose sight of the fact he's had one really good draft. and so far what we think is one really good free agency period that hasn't played a snap together on the field. So
yeah,
and there's been some good and some bad mixed in there, but let's, and I like what Caparoso says is like, okay, I'll send my apology when I'm celebrating a home playoff game, at MetLife. I won't be at MetLife probably, but I'll be celebrating a home playoff game from my home. But yes, I think that will be a good judge. Like, get us into the playoffs, and then we'll talk about us sending apology letters to Joe Douglas.
Okay. I agree. I mean, listen, he's had a good week, so I'm going to give him credit. He deserves all the credit in the world, and I know there's people who've argued me from the end of time that, I don't know what I'm talking about, saying that he's not good at his job, but like in a vacuum, he has to be good at his job, but we'll leave it at that. I digress. So quick hitters, go. Favorite move of the offseason, what was it?
Mike Williams.
Okay.
It has to. I'm a fan of the wide receiver position, like getting a legitimate number 2 like that. That's a jump ball threat. He's the perfect complement to Garrett Wilson, and knowing really that he was like the best and last option for them at that position to get, and they landed him. That's been my favorite move. Truly surprised they did it, and so beyond happy they did. How about yours?
Tyron Smith, just having a guy with that potential upside and just knowing what he's done in his career, it's amazing. But Mike Williams is certainly up there for me.
Yeah.
If you had said Tyron Smith, I was going to go Mike Williams.
Gotcha.
But what was your least favorite move? I feel like you kind of already touched on it, but was it Bryce Huff leaving?
Yeah, I mean, that has to be. I just, and I'm not a cap guru, so I don't really know, but I still feel like no matter, like if they sign Clowney, I got to imagine it's in that 7 to 9, 7 to 10 range. So I don't know how much they'd be saving, so I can't really call it like a cap move as to why they let Bryce Huff walk. But overall, like just letting him go, not getting anything, and knowing it was going to happen, like seeing the writing on the wall for so long, and then it coming to fruition was a real kick in the you-know-what. And that was my least favorite move of the offseason, or lack of a move.
Okay.
Yours?
Mine was Kinlaw, and it's because of the money. It's not because of the player. I just think they need to allocate $7 million guaranteed to a guy like that. I think that they could have got him probably for half of it. So that's it. I think he's gonna be fine. I think we'll be, hopefully he surprises me like the way Solomon Thomas did when they brought him in. But I'm higher on him. It's just the money did not make sense. But again, everything worked out the way we hope. But if that's maybe potentially what doesn't allow us to get Clowney because we didn't allocate enough money for him, so be it. But that's where I would say I'm a little annoyed. And then real quick, where do the Jets rank in terms of rosters in the AFC East? I know this was your idea.
Yeah. I mean, here's what I'll say is it makes me happy because it feels like for the longest time, the Jets have kind of had this like antiquated view of building their team, and they've really tried to like build it on the defensive side of the ball to keep up with the offenses in the rest of the AFC and specifically in the AFC East. And now I feel like they finally like turned that corner to where they're like, you know what? Let's try to outscore the opposing offenses in the AFC East. And I think that's really what we're starting to see because you have Aaron Rodgers, you have Breece Hall, you have Garrett Wilson, Mike Williams, like all this stuff now, which is really good. So I think honestly, it's really the 3 teams clumped together, and it's the Bills, Jets, and Dolphins all in one. And the Patriots are kind of a distant last, right? They're out of that pack. So I'd still say that the Bills are kings of the division until they aren't, even though I think with this offseason, they've taken a step back. So they're much more within reach than they were. But I would have to say, like looking at things, and how we kind of saw the end of last season play out specifically for Miami and how they finished, I'd say it's Bills 1, Jets 2, Dolphins 3, and they're very close, but that's kind of how I would see it. And I think the Jets have a real shot. I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, but they got a real shot at winning the division here in 2024. What do you think, man?
Yeah, it's like my thoughts. I mean, I could be bold and say I think that they have from the top to bottom roster. I think it could be arguably the best in the AFC East. Yeah. But again, I have to see it on the field. But I think, like you said, the departures that both Miami and Buffalo have had are going to impact them a lot. I know that they've definitely recouped, but I think you got to remember Miami's offensive line. I think they lost Connor Williams, they lost Robert Hunt, and they did bring back Teron Armstead, but he's flirting with retirement. So you're basically going to have 2 new starters, probably rookies most likely, and a guy who's basically has 1 foot left, in his career. 1 foot's out the door, 1 foot's still there. So I don't know. It's hard to really trust it, and they're about to allocate a lot of money to Tua. Like when they sign that extension, I'll be celebrating because that means they can't pay anybody anymore. Yeah. I know they have the best wide receivers in the division. That's not up for debate, but it's just hard to say. The Jets have the best defense in the division, in my opinion.
Without a doubt.
And now they have a better offense. So it's like, you kind of have to think, and they have a good special teams. They have their 2 or 3 best guys back. So,
and the thing is, like, what it comes down to, and we've only seen Aaron Rodgers in a Jets uniform for 4 snaps, right? But what it comes down to is trusting the quarterback. So when you put those 4 quarterbacks together and you say which one do you trust the most to like make plays come January, February, like who's it going to be? You know what I mean? And I don't know. You're definitely not going to say as much as we wanted Jacoby Brissett. You're not going to say him, right? I don't think you're going to say Tua. So it's going to come down to Josh Allen versus Aaron Rodgers, and that's it. Do I say it's a coin flip? Like, I don't know. I mean, that's what it's really going to come down to, though.
If Aaron Rodgers is 90% of the player that we expect him to be, I think it's a coin flip, just because I know he won a Super Bowl in 2010, but he certainly had his shortcomings in the playoffs after that. And obviously Josh Allen has yet to get over the hump, and people are saying, like, is he ever going to do that? So to me, I mean, it's the league still runs with Mahomes. You got to just keep that in mind when you're thinking about big picture. But I feel good. The draft obviously still has to happen. There's be a few more signings. Hopefully they bring a couple guys back, but I'm feeling a lot better than I did a month ago. I'll tell you that much. It's nice. But again, on paper, nothing's happened. We got to just temper our expectations and protect ourselves, because our emotions sometimes get in the way and we, make ourselves crazy. But
my hope is that the rock bottom that was the 2023 season for all of us, I think that's a safe assumption, right? Is that there's nowhere to go but up, and that we went through that for a reason. We endured that pain for a reason, and we're going to come out on the other side, and we're going to be so much better for it. And that the team and the organization and the front office realized what needed to really happen to get this done and to get this team over the hump and back in the playoffs. And that all of that last year wasn't for nothing. It was for something, so we can just feel how good it is on the other side.
Yeah, totally agree. Russo, this has been so much fun. I'm so glad that we finally did it again. Appreciate everybody who watched, live, anybody who's listening, whether it's on the Badlands feed or they're listening, tomorrow or watching tomorrow. It's awesome. Make sure, if you're not a Badlands subscriber, now's the time. It's been peak this offseason. The Discord has been firing off. I know later in the week we'll have Buck the Trend. We will have TOJ Talks on Saturday, other guys, your regular content cooking. And just for anyone who's a Badlands subscriber already, this show will be rotating in audio form every other week through the draft. You'll have draft season next week. But we appreciate everybody for tuning in. It's good to be back, and we'll talk to you guys soon.